Hey guys, welcome to the video. My name's Ian, and today's video is just going to be a quick documentation of some of my flight hours while I'm obtaining my private pilot's license. Today's flight was just completing the nighttime landings required for the PPL, and I think prior to this we had completed 3, so tonight's flight was just going to be 7. So yeah, the video is just here as just documentation, so in the future when I have my commercial and ATP certification and all that stuff, I can look back and see how I was thinking and what I was doing at the beginning of my career. So I did have the cockpit audio to this, except I tried emailing it from the iPad. I was recording with my Lightspeed headset, and I recorded it onto my iPad, and then I emailed it over to myself, and then for some reason the email was empty. There was no attachment. So that was a little upsetting, so I'm just doing a quick narration. Hopefully next time we'll get the audio for this. But yeah, this is just the first video I'm going to be using to document my flight. And yeah, that's pretty much it, so enjoy the video. Alright, so at this time I just started the engine and I'm doing my pre-taxi checklist. So we have checklists, and that just ensures that we're going through everything and we're making sure we hit every single point that we have to, just to ensure a safe flight. We do checklists at almost every time during the flight. We have cruising checklists, we have before landing, we have descent checklists, we have after takeoff checklists, and after landing, and just a lot of checklists. It just helps us to make sure that we're not forgetting any crucial component of the flight. I'm also going to cut this video up into small sections. The video is an hour long in total, so I'm just going to speed through some of the boring parts. It'll be nicer next time when we have the cockpit audio, so I'll make sure to hopefully get that next time. So at this time we're going to go ahead and start our taxi. We're currently located at Chennault Aviation Academy, and we're flying out of KCXO, which is Conroe. It's just north of Houston, Texas. So we're going to go ahead and taxi over. We're looking both ways just to ensure there's no other aircraft trying to taxi on the ramp. And we're going to get to the hold short line, and we're going to, since the tower closed, this airport is usually towered, yet the tower is only operational from, I believe, 6 to 9 local time. So it's about 9:30, 9:40ish at this time, so we're going to go ahead and just treat this airport as an untowered airport and just announce what we're doing to the common traffic advisory frequency. So at this point we've just announced to the Common Traffic Advisory Frequency, or CTAF, that we are going to be entering the taxiway, and we're taxiing via Foxtrot, Delta, and Alpha. And then we're going to go ahead and use runway 14, which is the longest runway there. It's just the best. It's better to use a longer runway when you have one, because it is nighttime, and it just gives us that more of a safety cushion. I believe it's an extra 2,000 feet at Conroe. I'm going to go ahead and speed up this taxi process, and then we'll get to the run-up portion. Quick side note before we get to the run-up portion, as you can see just then, off to the left of the video, we saw that light go off and on. What that is that is our landing light. And actually this aircraft has 3 landing lights. It has one under the propeller and then 2 off of the wingtips on each side. Yet during this flight, during the pre-flight inspection, we noticed that the front center landing light was actually out and it was not working. So right there we were just testing to see if we can see the light again. And some would wonder why we're still allowed to fly with one light out, and the nighttime requirement is that we have at least 1 landing light. So most of our aircraft only have that center landing light, but here we actually have 2, so technically we're still double the requirement even with 1 landing light out. And it did make it harder, as you'll see when we're coming in. It is a little different to judge the perspective of how high you are when you're about to touch down, when you're in ground effect, but it was still fine because we still had 2 landing lights. With no landing lights, we're not allowed to actually fly. So right here we've just pulled off to the run-up portion of the airport. Each runway usually has a section of larger ramp so that aircraft can pull over and do their run-up checklist. So basically for a run-up we're increasing our engine throttle up to 2,000 RPM, and we're checking to make sure that all of our instruments are in the green. During the checklist we'll turn our carburetor heat on, and carburetor heat just prevents carburetor icing due to lower altitudes and just ensuring that our carburetor doesn't ice up and stall basically. And then also we check our magnetos. Magnetos, we have a right and left magneto, so we do have 2, and those are what produce the electrical charge needed to ignite the spark plugs. So basically if we were to turn off the master switch, the aircraft could continue running because the electricity for running the aircraft is coming from those magnetos. And sometimes they'll have carbon buildup on the surface of the magnetos, which will cause a rough running on certain magnetos, and we can just burn that off by switching it back to both and then increasing the throttle at full throttle for about a minute. So yeah, we'll see that process. Just then I was actually changing the trim in the top right corner. That is the trim lever, and we'll talk about that later on in the video. So we're going to go ahead and do our run-up process. I'll skip through it real quick, and then we'll go ahead and get to takeoff. And just like that, our run-up process is complete. So we checked everything looked good. And now we're going to go ahead and do our before takeoff checklist. Basically, it's just ensuring that everything looks correct, the radio's tuned to the correct frequency. We're going to contact tower. If there was a tower, we'd contact tower, but since their tower is closed, we're going to go ahead and stay on the CTAF. And we're going to just turn our fuel pump on, verify fuel pressure looks good, make sure our fuel gauges are still full. And there's a couple other things in the checklist I'm forgetting, but that's why we have checklists. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and speed it up, and then we're going to get into the sky. So right here we're holding short of runway 14 at taxiway Alpha, and all we're doing right there, you can see me, I'm checking final to make sure there's no lights I see on final, and we just made a quick radio call on the CTAF, just letting everyone know that we're entering 14, and now we're going to taxi out, and since that center landing light is out, it's kind of hard to see the center line that we're supposed to follow, so we're going to do a slow taxi out there, line up with center line, we're going to release the brakes, introduce full power, check our instruments, and then wait for 60, there's the thumbs up. So we had a successful takeoff, and now we're just climbing out at about 85 miles an hour, and we're looking to get to the altitude of traffic pattern altitude, or TAF, and that is usually 1,000 feet above ground level, or so 1,000 feet AGL, and Conroe's elevation is 245 feet, so it'd be 1245, and we just use 1,300 just to cushion it off, round it up a little bit. So now we're climbing up to 1,300 feet, and as you can see, it's very dark outside, and I know just the GoPro is not too good at absorbing light into the lens, but even in real life, it was this dark. This is exactly what it looks like outside. It's definitely super scary, and you can see the trend throughout the night was that I was always high on glide slope on final. Our glide slope was usually pretty high, and that was just because the runway is long enough. We know that we had enough runway, and I think it was just me being the second time I'd flown at night. It was a very scary approach. You'll see, as you're turning from base to final, it's just a very dark area. There's no lights or anything. It's just forest out there, so it is very dark and pretty scary. So I'm going to go ahead and speed this part up, and we'll get to our first landing. So as we can see, the runway has just shown itself off to the side of the screen, off to the left. And you can see it's all lit up like a pretty Christmas tree, like some pilots say. The bottom of it's green and the top of it's red, and you see all those lights on the side that just indicates the barriers of the runway. And this airport's actually pretty cool. A lot of airports have it nowadays, but what they have is something called pilot-controlled lighting. So when the tower's closed, or at a lot of untowered airports, you can stay on the common traffic advisory frequency, and depending on how many times you click the push-to-talk button on your yoke, it'll change the brightness of the lights. So 3 clicks within 5 seconds will turn it down to low intensity, and then 5 clicks will turn it to medium, and then 7 clicks will turn it to high. So usually for me in the pattern on the downwind leg, I'll turn it up to 5 or medium intensity so I can see the runway a little bit better, and then when we turn on the final, I'll turn the brightness down to low because it does give a pretty high glare in the windshield that can blind us sometimes, or it'll make it harder to see. So yeah, I'll go ahead and just skip through some of the pattern work, and we'll just play the 7 landings out, the next 6 landings I guess, out at normal speed. So as you can see, just like how all the other landings will be throughout the night, they were all a little rough. I had a couple good landings, very smooth landings, but most of them were pretty rough, and that's just because at nighttime it is a little bit harder to judge how high you are off the ground. And I think also that fact of not knowing how high I am without that center landing light was causing me to flare a little bit too high. I was flaring at about 10 feet above the ground, and really my flight instructor was saying I should have been flaring about 5 feet above the ground. So that caused a lot of these hard landings because I'd flare a little bit too high and then I noticed I'm starting to build altitude again. So I'd go back down and then it'd cause it not forcing a landing, but not pushing the nose down, but just kind of coming down a little bit rough. And also, as you can see, the GoPro wasn't mounted very securely and looks like it turned out to the left, so it'll be like that the rest of the video. But yeah, let's just enjoy some of these hard landings. So that landing, number 2, I thought about not even including because it was so bad. No, but basically what happened on that one is I did flare way too early. I didn't learn from my first landing. And I flared back a little bit too early, and I ended up actually stalling right above the ground, which is what you're supposed to do when you're landing. You're supposed to have a nice soft stall. But for that, I pulled back, I started gaining altitude, and I pushed the nose down, and then I noticed I was pulling back again. So I pulled back up, but I was coming down at such a high velocity that we kind of hit the ground pretty hard. And you can actually see in the bottom corner, if you rewatch it, the red light comes on right next to the airspeed indicator. That is the stall indicator. I know some of the Cessnas have a stall horn, so it'll make a noise when it's stalling, but for the Pipers, they don't have a horn, they have an indicator, a light that lights up. So that light lit up, and that just indicated a stall. And you really are supposed to stall the plane right before the ground. So that's how a landing is. You're just stalling it right before the ground, and then you usually touch down softly on the ground. But for that one, it was just I stalled a little bit too high, which caused me to kind of hit the ground pretty rough. So that right there was probably the best landing of the night, or the last one, I'm not actually sure. But also I just noticed in the video when I was watching it, you can hear the audio of the other traffic coming in behind us. And I'm wondering why you can actually hear it in the video. I bet we just played it through the speaker. The Pipers have a built-in speaker in the roof so that we can hear it without a headset. But you should generally always wear a headset because the engine noise is pretty loud in the propeller. So, yeah, that was a pretty good landing. I kind of realized that I was flying too high, and that time I flared just at the right time, and it was a nice soft landing. I know it looks a little bit rougher in the video, but in real life that was a pretty soft landing. Looks like that was a pretty good landing too. So right here we're pulling off of the runway, we're going to taxi back. We're doing a taxi back to the beginning of the runway because, as you can see actually right there, that little dot on the screen, that is a plane coming in to land, so we didn't want to be in his way. So instead of just stopping on the runway and taking back off, or taking off again, we are getting out of his way, so we give him full length of the runway, and so he doesn't have to do a go-around or anything. So now we're going to taxi back, and we'll complete out the last, I believe, 3 landings. And just like that, I finished my nighttime requirements for my private pilot's license. Thanks for watching the video. If you made it all the way through, that's pretty cool. It's a pretty long video. Hey, future Ian, I hope you're doing good. Hope you're still pursuing real estate and everything. And yeah. I also remember, just a side note for just myself in the future, it was a very windy night. I believe the METAR said it was winds 12 knots and gusts at 21. So I remember the whole night as we were coming over that tree line, we were getting shaken up by the winds blowing over the tree line, and it made it a lot harder. So I'd say just good job, Ian. He did good on all the landings. And yeah, I hope you're still doing good. I'll see you next video.